What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan Thomas. Welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I am your host. Thank you so much for listening to my UFC 205 mock card. If you have not checked that out, check it out. I just posted it, just finished it up. So thank you to the live listeners that were listening to that on YouTube, Twitter, and also I have an Instagram now. So my Instagram is at ThomasTake92. My Twitter is at ThomasTake92. If you have any questions for the host, if you want to submit questions, email me at ThomasTake92@gmail.com. That's my email, ThomasTake92@gmail.com for the podcast, for the show. Been submitting questions from fans and stuff like that. It's been really, really cool. People tell me where they're from. I've got this guy in Oakland that's wanting me to preview the Oakland Raiders. I'm going to get to that. We'll get to that, definitely. But tonight's about the UFC and mixed martial arts. I want to cover that sport. I love the mixed martial arts sporting league, the UFC. I'm a real huge fan, real avid fan. I've been for a long time. And Saturday, September 10th, UFC 203, the main event is Stipe Miocic versus Alistair Overeem for the UFC heavyweight title. Also the co-main event, Fabricio Verdum versus Travis Browne 2. And the debut, obviously, of Phil Brooks. Who the hell is Phil Brooks? Phil Brooks is CM Punk, the former WWE champion and now mixed martial arts fighter, versus Mickey Gall in his second fight in the UFC. Very exciting stuff, guys. Where do I start? We'll start with the CM Punk Mickey Gall fight. We'll move from there. CM Punk, the evolution of Punk has been a well-documented show. I've enjoyed watching it. It's been interesting seeing a guy that went from one world to the next. Kind of the mindset that CM Punk has entering this fight. You can say what you want, but I do admire the fact that he is stepping out of his comfort zone, and he's really trying to do something that is very difficult. And he has a lot of naysayers in the background, and he has shown that he really doesn't care. He feels like he needs to do this not just for himself, not just, to test himself, not to test himself athletically, but as a person, something that he wanted to do before his athletic career was over. I have high doubt as far as whether he can win the fight, but look competitive while fighting. I have serious doubt, not just because we're talking about a guy that, is not just because we're talking about the obvious. I just have serious doubt that, for obvious reasons, he's a guy that has been in the WWE for the last, 15, 20 years. He does not have a pedigree in any discipline of MMA, whether that's, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai, karate, boxing, wrestling. He was a professional wrestler. That's a lot different than amateur wrestling. He didn't go to college for wrestling. He probably wrestled in high school, I'm assuming. So it's really tough to say that, he can beat a guy that is younger than him, that has the experience and the pedigree that he does not have. That's very tough to say. Is it impossible? No, nothing in this sport is completely impossible. I've seen a lot of crazy things, especially within this last January 1st of 2016 to August 20th of 2016, the last pay-per-view for the UFC. I've seen a lot of crazy shit. Really have. We all have. Diehard UFC fans, we've seen a lot of crazy shit happen. And, it could happen. He could win this fight. It's possible. But I have serious, serious doubt whether he could win this fight. I would be just as surprised. The amount of basically just bewilderment I would have if he won that fight would be to the tune of the Buffalo Bills making the playoffs this year. I would be shocked. Just shocked if that happened. I compare it, to that because that's the shock I would feel if the Bills did make the playoffs in the NFL. So that being said, Mickey Gall's a guy that is highly disciplined, highly talented, a young prospect, young phenom, so to speak. that can finish fights very quickly with his jiu-jitsu and standing up with his boxing. So a well, tuned athlete. He has only fought a few professional fights. Actually, he's only got one professional win on his record in the UFC. Actually, 2 professional wins on his record. And he's very limited experience as well, but he has more of a pedigree, an actual mixed martial arts pedigree. I see Gall winning that fight. It's just that simple. The next fight, obviously, that I mentioned is Fabricio Verdum versus Travis Browne 2. In the lead-up countdown to UFC 202, they talked a lot about how this fight is a rematch, and it is. Obviously, Browne, had lost to Fabricio Verdum on a main event of a UFC on Fox card in Orlando back in 2014. So Verdum, obviously is the favorite in this fight. That's obvious. He's got the pedigree. He has the win over Browne. He's the former heavyweight champion. His last fight was a heavyweight title loss to Stipe Miocic, obviously, very quickly, where he was fighting in Curitiba, Brazil, where he had all the fans in his favor. All the crowd was rooting for him. And he kind of let his emotions get the best of him, tried to go out there and run right after Stipe, exposed himself, and got caught, which happens a lot, surprisingly. I never thought it would happen to a guy as well accoladed as Fabricio Verdum. You're talking about a guy that, has been in mixed martial arts for a long time, and has beaten some of the best in the sport. Big Nog back then, in the UFC a few years ago. Fedor Emelianenko, that was Fedor's first loss in 10 years to Fabricio Verdum. So, Verdum has a lot of accolades to his name, and for himself to go out there and run out there and leave his chin exposed versus a guy that really had the advantage over him via power in a fashion such as that, I felt that was just a huge mistake. Will Verdum make a mistake against Travis Browne? I do not think so. Travis Browne's last fight at UFC 200 was a loss to Cain Velasquez, where he just looked completely outclassed. I know Cain Velasquez is one of the greatest UFC heavyweights ever, maybe the greatest. But Fabricio Verdum ran over Cain Velasquez. For whatever reason, whether it was because of altitude or whatnot, Verdum has the mental edge in this fight. I think Travis Browne is really trained hard, really working hard to make sure that he gets a win over Verdum this time. But I don't think it'll be enough. I think Fabricio Verdum is too well-rounded, whether it be striking, jiu-jitsu, obviously. Browne did land, it was a close fight initially until Verdum was able to finish it, but, I think Verdum really has a lot to prove in this fight, more so than Travis Browne. I feel like Verdum wants it more than Travis Browne does, and I see Verdum winning that fight for sure. Now the main event, Stipe Miocic, the guy that broke the Cleveland curse, the man that won the heavyweight belt over Fabricio Verdum in Brazil. He had all the odds stacked against him. He went out there, basically avoided, backpedaled, and popped Fabricio Verdum, won that fight, won the UFC heavyweight title. How could you not like Stipe Miocic? That's my thing. How could you not like that guy? Watching him at the Q, rooting for the Cavs, that was pretty awesome, where he was sporting the heavyweight strap around his shoulder. He's a volunteer fireman in inner Cleveland. Just one of the coolest guys, I think, to ever fight in the UFC. One of the most down-to-earth human beings that has ever fought in the UFC. Really, he has that heavyweight champ mantra and attitude, and that's the kind of guy you want to be the heavyweight champ of your organization, of the world in mixed martial arts. And I really, really like the guy. It's really tough to root against him. I'm really hopeful that we do see a champion defend their belt in the UFC at heavyweight. But he is going up against the former K1 champion Alistair Overeem, a guy that is highly decorated, probably one of the most decorated strikers in mixed martial arts, former K1 champion, Pride champion, Dream champion, Strikeforce champion. He's a 4-belt, 4-organization heavyweight champion except for the UFC. Basically, he's the Dan Henderson of heavyweights without the 46-year-old age tag to his name. He's younger than that, obviously, and he's accomplished everything but winning a UFC heavyweight title. This fight is so tough to call. We do have to acknowledge that Alistair Overeem has had some bumps in the road. He's lost to Travis Brown. He's lost to Bigfoot Silva. He's had some bumps in the road. He has fought more methodically, over the last few of his fights. Obviously over Andrei Arlovsky. He fought a very well-tuned fight in that fight. And Stefan Struve, he fought a good fight. So I think the experience of Alistair Overeem should definitely be noted in this fight. But I'm wondering if he can take a punch from Stipe Miocic. Miocic hits very hard, and Miocic's ground game is very underrated. We don't really get to see a lot of it because he finishes those fights. But I am all about experience in the game of MMA. Experience can be a double-edged sword. You could have too much experience to the point where you're completely worn out as an athlete and as a fighter, or that experience can really help you over an opponent, I should say, male or female, that, isn't as experienced as you. And with the way that the heavyweight belt has changed hands so much, and with the way that these gloves are crafted in MMA with heavyweights especially, they have the giant, massive hands, and if they land one punch, then a guy's going to go out. It's a really tough fight to call. If Alistair Overeem keeps it at his pace, really makes the fight long, I'm going to give it to Overeem. But if Alistair Overeem goes out there and goes right after Stipe Miocic, he might get knocked out, much like Fabricio Verdum did. I'm going to go with Overeem for this fight, though. I'm going to go with Overeem because I think that the experience will make a difference in this fight. I don't anticipate Alistair Overeem going out there and gunning right after Stipe Miocic. He knows what Stipe did to Junior Dos Santos. He knows what Stipe did to Mark Hunt. So, he knows what Stipe did to, I believe, when he fought Travis Brown. So I think it's... And he obviously knows what Stipe did to Fabricio Verdum. So if he goes right after him, that is a mistake. But Alistair Overeem has some great coaches around him. I don't anticipate that being his game plan. I see Alistair Overeem relishing the fact that this is a long time coming for his UFC title fight. He'll go in there with the right game plan and win the fight versus Stipe. It might not be the most exciting fight. He might try to drain Stipe Miocic, clinch him, take him down, turn it into kind of a sprawl, a grappling match, clinching, draining out his arms, hoping that the power leaves his arms as the fight wears on and closing the fight out. But Alistair Overeem has been known to gas too. But if I'm going with my mind here, I'm going to say Overeem. If I'm going with my heart, I'd say Stipe. So I always choose my mind over my gut. When people say go with your gut, no, go with your mind. Go with what you see. I see Overeem winning the fight. I really do. So there you have it, guys. That's my prediction for UFC 203. I got Mickey Gall beating CM Punk, this being a one and done for CM Punk and a quote-unquote publicity stunt. I hate to throw shade at the guy, but we need to be realistic here. This is reality. This is not fake. This is, as Conor McGregor would say, this is the real shit, And I think he knows that. It's just, I don't think he's ready for what Mickey Gall has to offer. And obviously, Fabricio Verdum beating Travis Brown and Alistair Overeem beating Stipe Miocic. There you have it, guys. I am Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. That was my prediction for UFC 203 this Saturday night, September 10th. I cannot wait. Take care. Thanks for listening.